What's up, everybody? Corey Congilio here, and welcome to Surviving Guitar Episode 2. And in this episode, I'm going to talk to the one and only Tim Pierce. Now, I had a chance to talk to Tim at his house in California when I visited him after the 2019 NAMM show, and I said this is a perfect opportunity to ask him some of the questions that maybe he doesn't get asked from time to time. I created Surviving Guitar to talk to guitar players about what helps them survive this instrument. So what does that mean? Well, you may do this for a living and need to know some pointers about what you can do to get better gigs, teach lessons, work for guitar companies, all that kind of stuff. It may be about how do I not quit and give up? Are there any books, are there any motivational messages that I can listen to that can really help me on this path? I like to think of the guitar like a golf club or like playing the game of golf. It's different every day. You never master it. There's so many people that are really good at it. Some have great short games. Some have good long games. Some can finger pick. Some can shred. Some can write songs. And it's about pursuing all of those things and what it takes really for us not to give up and quit. So hopefully these guests that I interview will reveal something that motivates you and inspires you too. And I think Tim has really done that in this interview. I've heard him say some things in this interview that I've never heard him say before, and I'm so glad that I asked him the questions I did. If there's somebody that you want to see in this interview series, put it in a comment below. Subscribe to the channel for more videos. Make sure you hit the bell too, because then you'll get an alert of when I put up a new video. If you want to study guitar with me, I teach via my website, CoreyCongilio.com. I have over 15 guitar courses, as well as access to private study. And so sit back, relax, and enjoy 13 to 15 minutes of Tim Pierce giving us the goods. It's really, really great. And he even lets me play a little bit, and I might overindulge. But hey, you got to do it when you're in the room with the master. Okay, this is Surviving Guitar, Episode 2 with Tim Pierce.
Corey.
Yeah. Hey.
Welcome. Here we are in Southern California. It's maybe 70 degrees outside. How was NAMM? Was it fun?
You and I talked, best NAMM in 10 years.
I know it was fun.
Even day one, I was like, okay, why can't they all be this cool?
Well, I hope we make it a tradition and you come next year. And
absolutely.
We do the same thing.
Yeah. Well, it's really great to be here. I mean, it's going to be like a cold front sweeping over Nashville right now, so I'm really happy to be here for
a couple extra days in the sunshine. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, anytime I can get here is a good time.
So you have some questions?
Yeah, well, what I'm doing is I'm starting a series with some folks from not only Nashville, but just any guitar player that's a friend of mine. And I'm calling it Surviving Guitar because we can watch lessons and tutorials and gear demos all day. Mm-hmm. But a lot of us, we have these issues with art and playing guitar and basically trying to figure out how not to quit because it's this
right.
It's this mountain that is impossible to get on the top of, you know, because for everybody that's a Steve Vai, there's a Tommy Emmanuel, and there's, and if we're fans of all of it, how do we feel like we're really progressing or getting better? So some of the things I wanted to ask you about surviving guitar, like when you first moved to LA, there had to be some fear there about, can I do this? Is this the right move for me? And everybody feels that, whether they move to Nashville or Los Angeles or New York or any place, or if they're a surfer and they move to Hawaii or something. Yeah. There's that thing that's inside of us that says, should we do this? Are we going to be okay? Did you have those voices in your head, and how did you quiet them or manage that kind of moment for yourself?
Well, I was so unhappy in New Mexico that it was easy to leave. But once I got here, I would wake up every morning with a stomach ache because the city was so huge, and it was huge, and there was so much going on, and I had no part in any of it. And so it took a number of weeks for that to go away. And I, after about a month here, I was thinking, I'm not going to make it. I'm going to move back home. But then I started to get a couple of gigs, and I was able to keep my bank account at $700. It was funny. I was able to pay my rent, keep my bank account at $700, and start buying gear. And I thought, well, I think I'm swimming here. Yeah,
exactly.
I'm doing it. But the thing is, all you really have to do as your goal is pay your rent. Okay, so if you can figure out a way to move to another city, if that's your goal, but these days you can actually do it from your small hometown,
of course,
through social media, and then move to another city. There's different ways now. But if you're going to move to one of the major cities, the music cities, which now are LA or Nashville, wouldn't you agree?
Of course,
in America.
Yeah.
It'd be great if you had a family member to stay with. If you don't, if there's a way you can figure out to pay your rent and just kind of exist for a number of months,
sure,
that would be the key. That would be the secret, you
Yeah,
know?
I mean the same thing happened for me. I had a plan, and I always tell people I had a job. I didn't actually I had a gig. I went down there to look for some property, and a friend of mine said, "Hey, I met a guy in a coffee shop that I knew was a fiddle player, and he said, 'Hey, this band's looking for a guitar player.' They asked me to come back the next week to play a showcase, and I was like, I don't even live here yet." So that was like, okay, this is a good sign that this can happen. But try to get ducks in a row is what I tell people to, whether it's have a little money saved, maybe get a job or have something lined up or live with a relative. But one of the things I think that maybe started to happen, I want to assume for you, is you just have to live in the place and not get on the hamster wheel so quickly and just say, this is my home now, and I can't just beat myself up if I'm not successful in a month or
Right.
six or a
Yeah.
year.
You become a legitimate resident. Your stay in whatever new city you're in has to be solid enough to where you're not depending on, lightning to strike.
Right.
And what I always tell people, you have to live somewhere 2 years before you even know the lay of the land. And the other thing I tell people is you don't know when an opportunity is going to happen. It could be the first week, the first month, or it could be 6 years from now.
Correct. Yeah.
So you have to be who you are and be strong and wait for the opportunity to happen. And those happen randomly over the course of time. Now, one thing that I know someone who just moved to LA, and she benefited from the fact that she already has Skype students. So think about that. If you're living somewhere and you develop a Skype teaching clientele,
Yeah.
doesn't matter where you are.
Yeah.
And you could take that money and pay your new rent in your new city.
And that's what
That's one way. That's one way to do it.
Exactly. That's what I did with True Fire. Is like I could do it from anywhere. Why
Yeah.
not do it in Music City?
Yeah.
So that was a
Yeah.
big part of it, and I had some other things that were helpful too. But ultimately, I wanted to be a player and do sessions and tour, and that stuff slowly starts to happen. And I would beat myself up about I should be farther by now, that sort of a thing. But you can't. You just got to grind it out, and those things will start to accumulate overall. And the thing that stays constant, as I'm sure you can agree, is your reputation.
Right.
Yeah.
And there are different roles you can play in music. My role was to serve songwriters. So I would take a simple part, make it simpler, and that's what would make them happy. Now, that did not prepare me for Instagram in 2019, where Mark Letary and Isaiah Sharkey and Charlie Hunter and these people are jaw-droppingly amazing every minute. I'm not that animal. I'm a guy who plays in the ensemble. I play the right part for the song. It's a much more simple approach. So you should recognize that even though the competition is out of this world, your role in music might not be to be one of those guys. My role was to play on songs and work for songwriters and composers, and that's a very simple. It's a very difficult job. It's guitar orchestration. It's dealing with rejection a lot when people don't like the first part you played, and you have to come back strong with another part, and then strong with another part. All that stuff.
Sure.
But it's what I do is very simple in its execution. Once we get past all the difficult stuff. So there's lots of ways to be a creator.
Right.
And you don't have to be a virtuoso to do that. That is the hard thing if you're beating up on yourself, because we're looking at a renaissance of extraordinary guitar players all around us.
It feels like it's going back to the 80s or something.
Yeah.
Because instead of people coming to the stage and going like this,
Yeah.
they're looking at it on their phone. Impress me. You know what I mean? That's kind of the thing.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that we can all think about is that there is a lane for each of us to run in. And I relate to what you do very much, because most of the reason I moved to Nashville is I love songwriters.
Right.
And I always think that I can make them sound better. That's
and you still have that dream. I know you well enough to know you now. That's still your to be part of a song.
Yeah, it is. And I love to hear all those things develop around, because there's a generation of guitar players that won't play in bands very much these days. But you and I know what it's like and how fulfilling that is. When I taught lessons at a studio where we would have like a jam at the end of the year, which is a fancy name for a recital, what I mean? Well, so what I would tell the students that are 13 or 14 is when they played Paranoid with two adult musicians, I said, you're in the club. Because you'll never know what that feeling was like before. You know what I mean? Like when you have that connection and it all comes together and everybody lands on the same spot, it's a really beautiful thing. And I just think playing with people and being around energy is so
There's nothing
valuable.
better than being in an ensemble.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
you take
agree.
it back to a
Yeah.
big band or an orchestra, everybody playing together. I mean, it's not a selfish thing; it's a selfless thing.
Yeah.
Because you know, you and I are talking about being in 3 to 6 groups of ensembles, and
Sure.
that's really fun. But a lot of these guys were in groups of 20 to 30, and
Right.
so you're sharing. Nobody really gets to take the spotlight that
The
much.
pie gets really
Yeah,
sliced
exactly.
at
But
that point.
but
Yeah.
then hearing the size and the enormity and fitting into that kind of thing, it had to have been really, really pleasurable. I mean, it's pleasurable for me if there are 2 keyboard players. Like I'm going to do the Grammys in a couple of weeks in the house band. 2 keyboards, horns, percussion, drums, bass, 2 guitar players.
Hmm.
It just sounds,
Yeah.
you know, full and huge, and you can do the littlest thing, and it interlocks with the other little things. It's magical.
It's a wonderful sort of um, thing about humanity,
Yeah, right.
because at that moment it doesn't matter what any of the politics or any of the
Yeah,
uh, norms and standards and all that. It
yeah,
all comes together because the goal is the art,
yeah.
and it's really, I think, one of the reasons why we're so drawn to it, whether we know it or not, because
I
there
think
is
you're right.
that connection that's
I
involved.
think you're right.
So when you had finally enough money to buy some gear,
Yeah.
what was one of the first things you bought when you moved here and you were like, okay, I can do this now?
This was the era of just the end of Larry Carlton not being a session musician and him being an artist, a
Oh,
big
okay,
artist.
sure.
Steely Dan, Earth, Wind, and Fire. Lukather was going crazy, and Toto doing amazing work. So for me, it was the Mesa Boogie. I think it was called the Mark IV with
Mark, sure.
the wood grain cabinet and
Yeah.
the wicker cane.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was a grill cloth. I got that, and I would use that thing with a Marshall 412. I'd use it
Wow.
by itself with a 112, but also with a Marshall 412. But I remember buying that, and it was quite expensive,
Yeah.
and I think I had to order it and wait for it. And it was just, I felt like $1,000,000 when I got
Were they
that
in
thing.
Hollywood at the time, or
Well, they were not. They were never
oh, they
here.
were
I got
okay?
it
Yeah,
from Valley Arts Guitar, which is a whole nother legendary.
that's right. Yeah,
You'd walk in there, and Carlton would be in there, or
right,
Jay Graydon, or any
right.
of those guys, and they were all getting their guitars built and done there.
Yeah,
So there was a store that was the player's store, Valley
yeah.
Arts Guitar.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and so it was that. Then there were other things
Great
too,
era.
But really, when I first moved here, that was actually prior to that. I did get a Schecter Stratocaster,
Cool.
which because the Wang bar was really a popular thing, and then a couple other big things, and then I'll stop.
No, it's fine.
What was huge when I first moved here at the end of 1979? The Boss CE1 Chorus Ensemble, because it was the first time you could get a stereo spread
Hmm.
behind you.
Yeah,
And so people were getting pairs of these duplicate amps, sometimes mismatched amps, it didn't matter, but you would get a pair of your favorite amps, you'd put a Boss chorus in between, and you'd have this spread on stage that was just irresistible.
yeah.
And the other thing was the original Floyd Rose.
Wow.
So I saw Michael Landau play with Robin Ford, and he had his Strat, and he had dropped a humbucker in the bridge position, and he had the original Floyd Rose on it. So all of a sudden, we were perfectly in tune all the time and able to do any
Yeah.
number of, what's it called?
Yeah.
Dazzling things with our Wang bar.
Sure.
Now the thing you had to do with the original Floyd Rose,
Mhm.
you had to compensate because when you twisted the
Yep.
nut, it went sharp. So you
That's
had
right.
to tune flat on the B string and the E string, and there was an art to it. Just guessing how to keep things in tune. But once you got it in tune, it was incredible.
I had a BC Rich with a it was more Strat style, so
Yeah.
they still let me in the blues jam, even
Yeah.
though it had a pointy headstock.
Right.
But it had a Floyd Rose, and it was one of those things where in my young playing days, I had no idea how to set it up, and it was going bananas. I mean, all over the place. But once you did, it was like a thing of beauty. A well set up Floyd
Yeah.
or a Kaler or something.
Yeah.
I mean, just gorgeous. You
Yeah.
know? It's a really, really great invention if you know how to how to set it up properly. So one last thing I wanted to ask you is like, I think that unfortunately in this day and age, we can hide behind sort of our highlight reel online. But I know talking to my close guitar friends that, when you have lunch or coffee or something, we will get in these ruts. And I think it's important to kind of find ways to build each other up and get out of those. So part of my sort of surviving guitar name tag that I attach to these interviews is not only how can you survive, financially, but can you survive mentally with this instrument that's so daunting, and the new gear comes out and we feel like we have to have the latest thing, and then all of a sudden we stumble on Mateus Sasato and we're like, oh, I gotta quit now. Like, I'm never gonna be as good as that guy, that kind of stuff. Like, how would you recommend someone that maybe needs to a little pep talk? Like, what would you give
Well,
to them?
I have a supportive community, and it's some I've depended on guitar players when I've gotten in that situation. About a year ago, I was feeling very down because the players on Instagram were just blowing me away, and I was realizing I'm not that animal. It's not going to happen for me. I'm going to play simple for the rest of my life. So I have to plant that flag.
Yeah.
And I came through it, and now I'm fine with it. I'm totally fine with it.
Mm-hmm.
I called up Sean Tubbs,
Mm-hmm.
and I have another friend here in town, Andrew Sinowick, who's kind of the number one young studio guitar
Sure.
player.
Yeah.
Brilliant guy. And I basically told them the truth, and they basically gave me, their opinion about what was unique about me, and not to worry about it. And so you can depend on other guitar players. The guitar playing community is really nice.
It really is.
Yeah, and you can be honest with certain people. You know the people you can trust. So that's really one thing. But I think you should always try and work really hard towards, like, if you want to play on songs, figure out rhythm parts off the greatest records of all time. Motown, the whole history of Motown, the 80s,
Yep.
The 90s, just if you put a pair of headphones on and you listen to, Stone Temple Pilots or Alice in Chains, and you hear what's going on the left and right. You put those same headphones on, you listen to Earth, Wind, and Fire, hear what's going on left and right. Any of the great music of any decade, just keep studying that. And I think as far as going out and playing songs and touring and being with bands, your skills will rise. You have to be confident. You have to know that you are going to bring on any particular moment or any particular day the goods necessary. The only way to do that is to immerse yourself all the time in the things that you love. So as far as getting in a rut, just keep fighting, fight, push.
Yeah, because it happens to everybody.
It's a very demanding instrument, and it will. I even, after the NAMM show Sunday morning, I had a film. I had a performance I had to do Sunday morning, and I had not really played guitar that much at the NAMM show, right?
Yeah.
So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I hadn't played guitar much. I sat down here on Sunday morning, and I was rusty.
Right.
So, and even like the Blue Angels, the fighter guys.
Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm.
I saw a thing where they talk about they actually practice every day. If they miss one day of aerial practice, it slips away. Now you don't have to practice 12 hours a day, but the thing is, if you can have this thing in your hands a number of hours a day, even if it's 2 or 4 or whatever, against all odds, you'll have a better chance of staying above some of those ruts and pitfalls.
Right, and it becomes more challenging as our demands change. With life happens.
Yeah.
A house, children, whatever, people that we have to pay attention to, our partners or whomever, that's all very important. But I also think that stuff helps to build our own individuality on our instrument. We can play with emotion and expression because of how we're supported by our families, our partners, and our friends. But you're right about the guitar community being so helpful. Is when I was in a smaller town, it was way more competitive.
You're right. People are kind of protective and scared and tight. Yeah.
And the Nashville thing, is so. Everybody's like, "Oh, it must be so competitive there." I was like, "I'm turning down gigs and turning people on to them all the time." I'm at a place there now where I'm giving gigs to people.
Well,
it's the best feeling in the world.
Yeah, I'm sure you are.
We don't make a lot of money in the sense to be philanthropic all the time. Like, I can't go support a foundation, or drop a check, but I can help a friend maybe pay his rent by getting him a gig.
Well, and I have a web business now, and part of that is part of that component. I feature great guitar players.
Yeah.
And I go down to Norm's, which is down the street, and I jam with great guitar players. I'm literally with guys who can play circles around me all the time. That makes you give up any of those.
Yeah.
It's just like you are humbled by just the talent that's around you all the time, and then you kind of you want to feel bad about it, and you want to feel sorry for yourself, and then you realize you can't.
Right.
And you find ways, like you ask your friends, and they say, "Yeah, you're special." Mike Campbell from Tom Petty's band is one of my favorite guitar players in the world. He does not care that all these other guys
No.
play all this stuff.
Right.
And that's the point you need to get to, where it's a form of expression.
Yeah.
It's not, technical ability is only a tool to express heart and soul.
Somebody will be attracted to what you are putting out there to the world, to the musical world. It's a really beautiful thing once you're confident enough to find that. Once you cross over that hump, I hope you never go back if I'm speaking to someone that's watching this, because it's really special.
Think about the guitar.
Yeah.
Simple stuff sounds great.
Right.
Right? Okay. Exactly. Or
It's one of those things I always try to say, and we'll teach more on it together, I'm sure. But who are you playing to? You know, to me and the one thing I always say is when I was trying to do fusion gigs and those sort of things, I'd spend hours learning this Mike Stern solo or something just to play, Jigsaw live or something. And there was 4 people there. It was fun, but it was really fun when I got to play a Tom Petty song or a modern country song in front of a bunch of people.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because, oh, that guy's selling out and he just wants to play in front of crowds. No, I wanted the connection. And I think what's really great about the country world that I play in a lot is people come to shows.
Yeah.
They want that connection. They can watch it on their phone, but they want to be communal. It's
awesome.
a really, really, really beautiful thing.
It's a party.
It really is.
Yeah.
Tim, thanks for taking the time to talk
you.
with me about this stuff, and they'll see more of us online doing a lot of great teaching.
Yeah, let's make it a tradition. Let's keep doing it.
Absolutely. Thanks again.
You're welcome.